Good morning. Thank you for being here. I'm Jaydeep Barrott. I am the headmaster of Bristol Grammar School and vice chair of HMC, and I'm also involved with this because I chair the HMC Reform of Assessment Group. Welcome to what promises to be a brilliant conference with loads of great ideas discussed and shared and some concrete inputs and take-homes for us all. But I am not the official welcome. I am not even the warm-up act. So the official welcome will come after this session. It was going to be Sarah Fletcher, but she's lost her voice, so Kate's going to do it for us. I'll introduce Kate later. In the spirit, though, of sharing great ideas and stoking further discussion, we're going to be hearing in this first session from our three sponsors, RM Assessment, Cambridge and Pearson. So let me first start by taking this opportunity to thank our sponsors for their support, without which this conference would not be able to happen in this format. Beyond that, of course, we're going to hear in this first session about the real expertise they bring and real innovation. The format's going to be simple. I'm going to introduce our first speaker in a moment, and then the other two speakers will be introduced after that. Each speaker will speak for, we did say up to 7 or 8 minutes. We've started a few minutes late, but the reason we want to get through it reasonably well is to leave enough time for Q&A at the end. So we'll hear from all three speakers, then if there's time, we'll do a Q&A at the end. But if we don't have time or you don't get to ask your question, they are here for the duration, so please do seek them out during the breaks. So let me start then by introducing Nick Hope from RM Assessment. RM is comprised of 3 businesses: Assessment, Technology and Resources. Nick himself has worked in education technology for over 20 years. He has a background in software engineering and completed his master's degree in innovation a couple of years ago. He comes from a family of teachers. Although he didn't become a teacher himself, he has been in and around education forever. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Jaydeep. Am I the warm-up act? No, I hope not. I hope not. Anyway, good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. Okay, I'm going to start with a prediction. Books are soon going to be obsolete in schools because motion picture is going to replace them all. Did you know this? Anybody heard this? Okay, well, I'm kidding, of course. Thomas Edison said this in 1913, and I think it's a really nice example of quite an optimistic view of what impact technology was going to have at the time. And we now know that this didn't quite come to pass. If we look today, over the last 2 or 3 years, as AI has emerged onto the scene, we see a similar level of optimism, I think. Now, some of these we are starting to see take hold in practice right now, and they're very believable. We're seeing them. Now, some of them, however, I think are a little bit more, let's say, far-fetched at the moment. Now, I have scattered QR codes through this deck, so if you want to scan as we go, please feel free, or talk to me afterwards. There are a couple on there at the bottom. The first one, Harvard psychologist Howard Gardner in 2025 said that AI is going to bring about the end of mass education because we will not need to learn anything anymore. AI is going to take care of it for us. Maybe. Similarly, 2024... Can you hear me? Okay, I'm going to keep shouting. Ray Kurzweil, 2024 futurist, said that with the help of AI, we won't need to learn anything because we'll be able to download information directly into the human brain, which again is a little bit terrifying, isn't it? So how do we know what's fact? How do we know what's just hype? The reality is we don't really. But I think if we look... Am I back? Yes. I think if we look to the past, it gives us a little bit of context around which we can consider what AI might bring us over the next few years. Again, QR code there if you want to look at this in more detail. Now, in my view, every technology that has impacted education and assessment has come from somewhere else, either directly or indirectly. There are a lot of antecedent technologies that have led to it. Now, one that really caught my eye was a piece of technology from the 50s, B.F. Skinner's teaching machine. Now, quick show of hands, who has heard of this? A few of you. This is mind-blowing. Okay, what was it? It was mechanical, obviously, back in the day. And what it was a machine that allowed students to answer questions by writing in a little window on the device. And if they got the question right, it would allow them to progress. Otherwise, it would go round the loop again. So it very much put mastery learning at its heart and used that instant feedback mechanism, kind of like the Duolingo of its day in a way. Now, I think there is some level of similarity here that shares some DNA, if you like, with some of the applications of AI that we're seeing now. I want to put that and AI into context with a couple of models that I'm going to share with you. The first one is Gartner's hype cycle. Now, Gartner have been putting a version of this out every year since 1995, and what they do, they plot the technologies of the day on this curve. This curve is a very predictable human response to new technology. It starts with some sort of trigger, maybe a technical breakthrough of some kind. We all get very enthusiastic, lots of media attention, and ultimately those expectations peak. Then some sort of realization sets in that perhaps the technology is not quite what we thought it was going to be. Not that it's worse, but the application of it's going to be slightly different to what we expected. It has to navigate what they call the trough of disillusionment before ultimately finding its place. Just like television did. It didn't replace books, but it found its place in the classroom. Now, if we look at the hype that was around in the 1950s and 1960s around that teaching machine, these are some of the quotes that we heard at the time, that it would replace a teacher. Okay, for example. And this sounds eerily familiar to some of what I've been reading about AI. I don't know why we're always so keen to replace teachers, but you know. Okay, in 2024, economist James Royal Lawson, he modified this curve because he said not everything makes it out of that trough. Some things go to what he referred to as the innovation graveyard, and that's exactly what happened to Skinner's teaching machine. Now, there are a few reasons for that. First of all, students stopped engaging with it. They found it boring, they started to find it a little bit repetitive. Teachers pushed back on it because they didn't like the idea of being replaced by a machine. There were cost implications. It was expensive to build, it was expensive to program. And of course, pedagogically, everything shifted away from behaviorism, which is what Skinner was all about, through to cognitivism, over the course of the 60s. The second model, a chap called Ruben Puentedura in 2006 put out what's called the SAMR model. Now, the SAMR model is like a ladder of technological impact, and every technology will sit in one of these categories, from simple substitution at the bottom through augmentation all the way up to complete redefinition. And there are some examples there on the right-hand side of what that might look like. Now, I think AI is starting to find a little bit of a niche at the moment around augmenting the human marking process, certainly something we're looking at within our M assessment. So if we put these two things next to each other in the context of Skinner's machine and AI, what does it look like? Well, on the SAMR model, I think they both sit in that augmentation space. Of course, Skinner's machine never made it beyond that. I think AI has the potential to certainly push into modification if the technology proves itself. And on the hype cycle, we know that Skinner's machine ended up in that innovation graveyard, and Gartner themselves say that AI is just past that peak of inflated expectations. So if the model holds true, perhaps over the next 6, 12, 18 months, we will start to see that realization of where AI can be applied usefully. And we're starting to see some of the limitations now, whether it's bias in the training data, hallucinations, students using it to shortcut their learning, and so on. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that when you look at these two applications, AI is certainly better than the teaching machine. But some of these barriers still have to be addressed, whether it's the cost, whether it's the bias. Will students and teachers push back on it? It remains to be seen. I'll finish with this. I think any technology, and AI is only one technology, remember, has to satisfy at least these 4 criteria. First of all, it has to offer a genuine pedagogical advantage over what we have, not just making things faster, not just making things more efficient, but actually impacting learning and teaching in a profound, useful way. We are going to need to adapt existing curricula and assessment modes, of course. We're going to need practitioners to be willing to adopt the technology. These people, you are the gatekeepers to technology in the classroom. And finally, the world beyond the classroom is where AI has come from. So whatever happens outside of education, of course, is going to have an impact, and we need to be ready to respond to that. I feel like the conversation could go on. Please do come and find me during the day. I'd be happy to speak to you. I'm also happy to share those QR codes if you want to have a look at this in a bit more detail later on. But for now, thank you very much for listening.
Morning, I'm Al McConville from King Alfred School and Rethinking Assessment. And really, since the beginning of Rethinking Assessment, one of the things we wanted to do is work with awarding bodies towards reform, and it's been a real pleasure to be able to do that with some of the awarding bodies. So I'm particularly delighted to introduce Meredith Reeve from Pearson. And she is the Research and Thought Leadership Strategist at Pearson, or one of them. And has also previously luxuriated in the title of Head of Next Generation Assessment, appropriately enough. And she's here to tell us about Pearson's recent report, Assessment Evolved, which thinks through how schools can respond to the emerging challenges of generative AI in particular, and not just protect learning integrity, but also harness AI for deeper learning. Meredith.
Thank you. I've got a lapel, so I should be okay. Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much, Al. It's my pleasure to be here. I actually joined on this stage last year in my previous role, thinking about high stakes on-screen assessment. So it's a pleasure to be here, focusing on a completely different area of assessment and learning this year. This is not my slide, so one moment. Fantastic. So the media landscape over the past kind of 18 months has been full of headlines about students cheating their way through university degrees, a crisis in academic integrity, and a real need for teachers to really get under the skin of what their students really know and can do in a world where generative AI tools are ubiquitous. So some of those you can see on the screen here, and it'll be no stranger to you. So at Pearson, we really wanted to get under the skin of what is the real impact of generative AI on formative assessment and learning. And for us, the focus on formative assessment was important because we know, of course, all of us, that it is the cornerstone of learning. It allows teachers and students to ensure that they know where they are in their learning journey and that they can plan the steps that come next for deeper learning. So we surveyed over 1,000 educators in the US and in the UK at secondary school level and at higher education level to really understand what their current perceptions were around generative AI for their students' use and their own, and how they might be either inviting generative AI in or keeping it out of their formative assessments, and what they saw the impact of that in terms of students' learning. So it'll be no surprise to you that teachers also, who responded to our survey, saw formative assessment as vital, and we're thinking here about structured formative assessment tasks that are kind of set as homework as the definition. So 80% of our respondents said formative assessment is either very or extremely important. Over 61% give structured formative assessments at least weekly, and around half are highly concerned about the impact of generative AI on formative assessment and learning. So when we were setting out to conduct this research, we set out to answer three key questions. Firstly, how should we design assessments in a world where Gen AI tools are ubiquitous? What kinds of tasks still hold up in this world? And how do we ensure that formative assessments maintain their utility and their validity? So alongside the survey, we interviewed around 15 global experts in AI assessment and education, including Professor Bill Lucas, who's with us today, to really understand kind of where we might go next. So around 82% of our survey respondents said they are at least moderately familiar with Gen AI, and perceived their students to be around kind of the same level of familiar. But interestingly, only 20% of secondary UK teachers who responded to our survey think that most of their students are using Gen AI to complete any formative assessments at home. Now, this is really interesting given that student-reported data suggests up around 90% of students are saying that they're using generative AI tools for formative assessment. Interestingly as well, only 54% of secondary UK teachers said that they could point to a policy at their school on generative AI use for students and teachers. So really calling into question, really, are the guardrails there? And do we have a really good understanding of what students are doing at home with Gen AI? So we analysed our survey responses on the qualitative side using latent profiles analysis to understand kind of where teachers are on the kind of spectrum. And we see these profiles not as descriptive, not proscriptive, and we understand, of course, that teachers will come in and out of these across time. But you can see kind of from the left to the right here, we categorised teachers' perceptions from kind of staunch traditionalists, kind of a small group who are really concerned and resistant to Gen AI and perceive students' AI familiarity as higher than their own and are the least likely to adapt their assessments with Gen AI in mind. Some in the middle, protective skeptics and cautious explorers, still making up their mind, see potential benefits for generative AI in assessment, but also cautious about the impacts. And then proactive innovators, a larger group than we expected, around half of our respondents, aware of the risks and drawbacks, but have a positive sentiment towards AI and perceive their own AI familiarity students' AI familiarity as potentially lower than their own. So I'd encourage you to have a look at the report to see more about this. When we spoke to our global experts, what we really understood was there is an opportunity for us to reframe this disruption as opportunity. So from the kind of individual level, thinking about AI as democratizing cheating, students' over-reliance harming skill development, through to a reframing of that. So how could we see this as an opportunity to renew the interest in intrinsic motivation and value of learning, a space to promote self-regulation and metacognition, and through to kind of system level. Institutions are slow to act. The speed of change is unprecedented. How could we reframe that as permission to innovate? So student-instructor dialogue and considering kind of culture change and sharing of best practice. So what we kind of lay out in our report, Assessment Evolved, is we think there's a moment to move beyond bans and detection and move to kind of a formative assessment evolution. We know, the evidence shows, that detection tools are increasingly unreliable and also erodes trust, where students are, we know, using these tools, but don't feel safe to kind of have that conversations with teachers to really test the limits of what they can and should be doing and how those tools might allow them to improve their critical thinking and, of course, to build the AI literacy that we know they're going to need in the future. So our argument is that detection is not a substitute for well-designed assessments that guide responsible AI use. For teachers, our report and school guide calls teachers and school leaders, most importantly, to adopt an experimental mindset towards Gen AI, of course within the guardrails of DFE policy, but approaching AI as a tool to test and learn and demystify its capabilities and impact. To strengthen assessment design using disruption as an opportunity, so rather than undermining the purpose of formative assessment, to reflect on what that purpose is and to think about where there are opportunities to improve the design of formative assessment. And thirdly, to integrate strategically. So obviously not carte blanche, apply to everything, but consider which structured activities can help students to develop the skills to use Gen AI responsibly and effectively. So a real shame that the QR code is not showing up, but please do visit us on our stand. We'd love to talk to you more about the report, and it is accompanied by a school educator guide, which is kind of grounded in research and talks teachers through the different steps they might take if they don't know where to start. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Meredith. And finally, we're going to hear from Dan Bray from Cambridge. Dan's going to talk to us as well about AI, and rather than focusing on the technology, he also wants to focus on the role of AI in learning and cognition. Dan.
Thank you. I think I need to flip back, and I saw my slides up here. You've had a sneak preview. Yes, so I want to talk about one of the major areas of research for us in Cambridge, which is what effect is AI having on the cognition of our learners. It's a truism we've all heard. We're preparing students for an uncertain world, jobs that we don't even know where they exist. We all know that to be true. But there are things we do know about what the attributes we need to encourage in our students. We know that to be effective in an AI-enabled world, they're going to need to be good at using the technology. And currently, probably the number one thing, can you ask good questions? Sometimes in prompt engineering in a AI world. We know students are going to need to be creative problem solvers. We know they're going to need to be critical about the information that they put in and the information they receive out from AI, and they need the skills to be able to do that. And we know they're going to need to be human. We know that they need to provide the ethics, the judgment that goes along with AI. It's that second one I want to talk about today, this creative problem solving. To solve any problem, you need three essential things. You need the information about that problem. You need the context, the data, the knowledge, the information structures in your brain. You need the skills and the ability to be a good problem solver. You need good problem solving skills, but you also need the cognitive capacity and brain space to be able to deal with the information to deal with that problem. And I want to think mostly about that. How do we give people that brain space to be able to deal with information? Because we know from a neuropsychological perspective that, and we've known this for a long time, the brain essentially has two processing systems. I know this is a very simplistic model, but essentially there are two processing systems. We have our declarative memory. We have the attention, what we are thinking about at the moment. We know that these systems are ultra flexible. We can think about anything, but we can only think about a limited amount of things at any one time. You can only think about one thing. You're thinking about what I'm saying at the moment, so you're not thinking about the weight of your clothes on your shoulders, or you weren't until I mentioned it. We also know that these systems are quite slow from a neuropsychological perspective, and we can only really think about one of them at a time. And we know where they are. They're in the hippocampus and they're in the temporal lobes, broadly speaking. Then we also have our procedural memory, our automatic memory, the things that we can just do. They require no conscious effort. They're much faster, but they can only deal with familiar things. Think about learning to drive a car. It's the classic example. When you first start, it's really scary getting in next to a learner driver, because all of their cognitive attention is paid up with finding the biting point in the clutch and where's second gear and how do I put the indicators on it, etc. And then very quickly you get to the point where you can just do that, and all your cognitive attention is, how do I miss that pothole? Is that pedestrian going to step out? Which direction should I take? But it takes practice and effort to move things from your declarative memory into these procedural memories. And that practice and effort, that struggle is really, really important in freeing up the space so that your declarative memory with its limited capacity can deal with the specific problem that you've been given at that particular time. And this is where the concept of cognitive offloading that I'm sure you've all heard about comes in. Because if we're allowing AI to do the thinking for us, in the short term, we may well produce an artifact which is really high quality, might even be better than we'd be able to do without the AI. But if we haven't been through that struggle of thinking, we are not doing anything to move our understanding from our declarative memory into our procedural memory. And that's really fundamental to giving us the space to solve these problems. But it's more than that, because it also tells us where to look. That picture on screen was produced by my iPhone. I just asked it to scan through the photographs tag for me and produce an image of me. And there's lots of things that are really great about it. I couldn't produce an image that good of me. I love cycling. Most photographs of me on my phone are me on a bike or stood next to a bike. The glasses are spot on. The haircut's absolutely perfect. But there are some things wrong with it. The first thing I looked at and went, hang on a minute, the hands don't look right. And they're not. I've got too many fingers. Well, in reality, I've got 5 fingers on the photograph. I've got 6 fingers on one hand and I think 7 fingers on the other. Now, I didn't look at that and consciously say, has it got the right number of eyes? Has it got the right number of ears? Has it got, I looked at it and went, hang on a minute, something doesn't look right about the hands. And my attention was drawn to the hands, and then my declarative memory took over and said, oh yes, it's got too many fingers, because I was paying attention to it. Now that, where to place attention was because the knowledge about how many fingers I should have is so well embedded in my procedural memory, it required no conscious effort in order to bring that forward. And it also releases neurotransmitters in the brain that prime me for learning. Now, that same thing is true when we come to thinking about more complex problems, when we're thinking about maths problems or chemistry problems. We need to be able to think like a mathematician automatically. That needs to require no conscious effort. You need to just have those mathematical structures embedded in your procedural memory so that when your attention comes and you're reading a problem, your attention is drawn to the right part of the problem. And we've known this for a long time. A psychologist in the 1940s, de Groot, was looking at expert chess players, wondering how come expert chess players can process so much information at any one time? And of course, he found they're not processing any more information than anyone else. What they're doing is processing the right information, because their models of chess playing have told them that part of the board, that's irrelevant. There's nothing happening over here. But that's where I need to put my attention. Whereas the novice players are looking at the board and trying to process every single move. We got a quote. This is how Professor Rose Luckin from UCL put it in a recent report for us about future-ready learning. She said, knowledge is something you have to actively construct. It involves you, and not just someone or something providing you with information. You should think about knowledge being the medium through which you develop these sophisticated learning skills. It's why the quote from our previous speaker about you won't need to know anything in the future, AI will tell you everything, is, in my view, fundamentally wrong in terms of what we should be doing. And that tells us a lot about us as educators and then as an awarding body, as an assessment designer, about where we should be putting our attention. We do know that LMMs are good for some things. We know that they can help they can help you navigate through a problem quickly. They can get you to understanding really quickly, or good LMMs can. But they can take away that struggle. And we've seen this in a recent study that came out in January from researchers with us in Cambridge in partnership with Microsoft. And they were looking at they were giving people reading comprehension students, secondary school students, reading comprehension tasks. And they were asking some of them to deal with them using LMMs, and some of them they were asking to record and write down their answers. Some of them they were just asking to deal with the problems with LMMs. We saw benefits in terms of the initial understanding in students if they were using AI, but when you come back a week, 2 weeks later and start asking them about the reading comprehension, the determining factor was the quality of the notes that they had taken about that problem. Now that's really fundamental, because in that case, that effort is represented by the note taking. But it's that effort as educators we need to make sure students are doing. So what can we do as teachers? It's things like reflecting on the prompts that students have made, making sure that they're doing that deliberately and they can articulate the strategies with which that they're asking those questions. It's getting them to critically evaluate what comes out. Has it answered the question? What are the biases that are contained within this? What have you done to control those biases? And then what are you going to do to build on that output and communicate that output to other people? It's that activity that's going to that's going to build the struggle in our students. And it's there that the teacher can have the maximum value in dealing with these these challenges. And it also tells us a little bit about, as assessment designers, what are we going to do about the challenge that was just mentioned before about coursework, essentially, as we've delivered it before, being a construct that has had its time, or will shortly have had its time. And essentially, we've got two strategies to bring in play here. First of all, we can concentrate more on the process than on the quality of the artifact produced. The quality of the artifact is no longer a reliable indicator of the quality of thinking that's gone into producing that artifact. And the second thing we can do is we can go back to a concept of saying, well, if AI is doing this, what's the extra bit that the human is bringing into the loop? And can we locate the marks in our mark scheme and our awards in that space in order to encourage that struggle? That's neuropsychology in 5 minutes. And two references. First of all, the study about LMMs and note-taking, which was published last month, and I really do recommend that. That's a fascinating read. But also want a shout-out to a paper written last year by Barbara Oakley at Oakland University, which really is, I think, the best description of neuropsychology and the effects of AI. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers from all of our sponsors. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Meredith. And thanks, Dan. We don't, as you can probably guess, have time for Q&A, but they are around the whole time. Please do go and talk to them at their stands and continue these excellent conversations. Can we say thank you to them one more time, after which we'll hear from Kate.
Good morning, everybody. It's really good to see all of you here. Thank you for coming. I'm Kate Howell. I'm Director of Education at HMC, and I'm just here to do the welcome bit that I know has had such a big build-up already. So it's some quick housekeeping bits from me and some thank yous, and then I will be handing back to Bill. So first thing to say is that this is a collaborative event, so between HMC, Chartered College of Teaching, the Edge Foundation and Rethinking Assessment. And we do it, this is the 4th time we've done this conference, we do it because we all feel it's really important to lead the national debate in this area. Now, the housekeeping bit. Hopefully you found the cloakrooms downstairs on your way in. The cloakrooms are manned all day, so if you need to leave at different point, if you need to leave early, you will be able to collect your belongings, so that was important. The loos are down there as well, and that's the only place that there are loos, so that's where you would need to go. Refreshments, we're going to keep you refreshed. There will be coffee at around 11 o'clock, and we hope that you will bring your coffee or tea up and have a look at the poster exhibition while you are doing that. Lunch we're aiming for 12:15. It's my job to keep us on time, so I'm going to be trying to do that. The event is busy, so I just ask you to be patient, but also to take care when moving around. And please do take time to speak to our sponsors. As you've heard from them already, they've got some really interesting stuff to share with you. I need to now move on to thank people, so some important thank yous. Thank you to those sponsors, so RM Assessment, Cambridge University Press and Pearson. Thank you very much indeed, sponsors. And then thank you to everyone involved in planning and delivering the event. There are lots of people who you can't even see running around who are involved in making this all work, so thank you. You know who you are. Thank you very much. Thank you to Haberdashers Livery Company for generously hosting us in their Grand Hall. Thank you to HMC, the Edge Foundation and the Chartered College of Teaching for enabling the event to go ahead. And thank you to our co-facilitators, Professor Bill Lucas from Rethinking Assessment, Ollie Newton from Edge Foundation, not here yet, but I know he's on his way, and Sarah Fletcher, can't speak, but Sarah Fletcher as well. So thank you very much, everybody. Please enjoy the day. We will request feedback after the event. It would be great if you could complete the feedback forms because that will help to shape future events. But now I'm going to hand back to Bill. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Kate. Lovely to be here. I'm Bill Lucas, and one of the group that have been campaigning somewhat vociferously about why and what we might do to further improve assessment practices. Just a few notes from me, and then we will crack straight on. You've had the housekeeping. Now the really important focus on the theme, which today is a mixture of engagement and inclusion. each of our annual conferences have always been about assessment, but have tried to narrow the lens slightly on a particular aspect, and it seems particularly appropriate today, particularly appropriate in the light of yesterday's white paper, and perhaps we won't get drawn into that at the moment. Some of you are not entirely happy with the way assessment is done in England, or Scotland, or Denmark, or Australia, or anywhere else. But there are some fantastic examples around the world. And what we want to do today is offer you an appreciative inquiry lens and shine a light from some of our brilliant speakers on what is going really well, the promising practices that will, we hope, motivate us. So we're going to hold out some visions of what might be, but at the same time, we're going to toggle back to, so what could I do tomorrow then? Or what could I do next week? So if you can have that mindset where you're thinking about the big picture and what that might need you to do, and also gathering up the practical ideas that you could use tomorrow and take back to your schools or wherever you've come from. I'm particularly chuffed that my colleague and friend, Professor Louise Hayward, is with us and has come from Glasgow to be with us, and she undertook a stunning review of what's going on in Scotland, which I believe we can learn a lot from. So there will be a feast of ideas. We'll have workshops, we'll have posters, and thank you so much to all of you who've contributed to those already. And now I'd like to pass to our host, Arabella, and invite her to say a few words. But just before I do that, you'll have noticed it's taken two of us to stand in for Sarah Fletcher. So Sarah is with us, even if her voice isn't as loud as it normally is. Arabella, thank you so much if you'd like to come to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Haberdashers Hall. My name is Arabella Gonzalez, and I'm Director of Schools for Haberdashers Livery Company. I wanted to take these few moments to explain to you why we were hosting this event. So the Haberdashers family of schools is a diverse and interesting family of schools. There are 2 MATs and about 7,000 pupils in them, and 2 independent school groups. So right from the beginning, we're an interesting mixture of different schools, and that helps us to think in a very wide way about education and to work together in a collaborative way to understand the high-level themes that are going on. One of the ways that we've done this, and I thought it was a good example to give you of how this has worked in practice, is putting together a unified response to the curriculum and assessment review. And I think when you hear about what our schools did in that context, then it will be clear to you why we wanted to host this event today.
Hopefully you can hear me better now. Hopefully you caught most of what I said before. So the issues that we came up with in terms of the curriculum and assessment review were a narrowing of the curriculum, an over-reliance on terminal exams, socioeconomic and systemic barriers, and limitations of the current curriculum. So you can see immediately that we are extremely aligned with today's event. The recommendations we came up with were a broader curriculum, and in itself that's something that we're already working on within the Haberdashers family of schools. We have a programme we call the Haberdashers Advantage, which is focused on, for students on futures and character development, and for staff and professional development and working together. Equitable qualification pathways, collaboration and professional development, and technical integration. So you can see the alignment with this event today. I thought I would finish by giving you our conclusion in terms of our submission, which is that education reform must be intentional, inclusive, and collaborative. We need to revisit why education is important to us, our why. This will help us to build a coherent and inspiring education system that aligns with the needs of society and economy. The Haberdashers Network urges policymakers to embrace a thoughtful, long-term approach to reform, ensuring education evolves to meet the challenges of a rapidly changing world while remaining rooted in equity, excellence, and opportunity for all. Education reform must be a journey, not a race. We need to take the time to get it right for our pupils, our teachers, and society. And that is very much a mission statement for us, and I hope it gives you the reason why we wanted to host this event today. And it also gives you the reason for another request from me, which is that as a group of schools, We are extremely open to partnership. We are always looking to work with people who have innovative and interesting ideas in this space. So please seek me out and talk to me about any projects you have that would be interesting to work with across a family of schools, which includes every type of schools, from small single form entry primary schools in very socially deprived areas of the country to large independent schools, and everything in between, including grammar schools, single sex, co-ed, prep schools, you name it. We have one of those schools in our family of schools, which makes us an interesting partner. I just want to flag my colleague Naomi, who's also in the room. Naomi, you can just stand up so people know who you are. So please seek one of us out and talk to us about any initiatives you'd like to explore from a partnership point of view. Thank you very much looking forward to today.